got any predictions for the Olympia, Andrew?
Oh man, dude,
it's crazy.
I think it's going to be good. It's whatever it is, it's going to be good. I don't even care who wins, honestly. I mean, obviously, Hottie and Derek are your front runners still. I don't think Samson, with his showing the other day, has shown enough of improvement that, because like I looked down and was like, oh yeah, he looks awesome, but it wasn't like jaw drop where you know, when you see Derek come out or you see Hottie come out, you kind of hold your breath for a minute, you know, and then they open up their back shots and you're like, oh my, but oh Jesus, my gut tells me that Hottie has been so driven this year, just the way he took that loss last year.
I agree
that there's nothing that's going to hold him back. Like, yeah, I think it's Hottie, Derek, Samson, and then after that, man,
it's going to be crazy, man. Just getting the top 6 is going to be they're all great, and they all are like going to be very awesome. Yeah. I would say like top 7 are all like potential Olympians, you know, or former Olympians.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew jacked with what he brought from Texas. If he's even just a little bit tighter, fuck, man, he's going to be 290 pounds on stage if he's just a little bit tighter, you know. Yeah, it's going to be wild. It's going to be crazy.
Hunter got 6th last year, was it? I think
so. Yeah,
6th. Yeah. I mean, I people are saying he's improved. You know,
he's improved, but he doesn't have the genetic caliber that your Derek. I mean,
but he could move up. You know, if he's improved, he could potentially move up. So,
but I think our sport literally is the one that at every level you go up, genetics matter more and more. And I guess you could say that about every sport, but genetics matter more and more. And though I will say this, I don't think Hottie has the best genetic structure, but he just has the detail everywhere, and he's got the musculature everywhere. So whatever he's lacking in terms of tiny waist, he hides it with good vacuums. He
has different genetics.
Muscularity.
So like the genetics of the muscle shape, the genetics of that density and that quality, you know, it's like, and the ability to get conditioned.
Yeah, it's,
and
I can't wait. I've been thinking about it every day. Like, man, this is such a good show. And then 212s. You guys seen Keon? His updates?
Oh yeah.
Like, dude, like it's finally someone's reached this guy into his soul and been like, hey, dude, like potential, let's bring it out. And it is coming out. Sean, obviously he's going to be improved too. You know, he takes no days off. He's no slouch on any department, but
we know he's going to
take a lot.
Yeah, he's going to be peeled. Like Sean, no matter what, is going to nail it. And if Keon is off in any way, like condition wise, then Sean will immediately expose that, you know?
He'd have to fuck up pretty bad, don't you think? It's no disrespect to anybody behind him. All I'm saying is,
I don't know.
I think Tour coaches him. So listen. So Dorian had Keon for a couple of years, and they were starting to see that inkling of potential coming out. You know, he won the shows he should have won, but he didn't. You know, he didn't do as well at the Olympia as he should have, or like the Arnold or something. And then John Meadows had him for about 5 minutes before he passed away. Unfortunately, John didn't get to really do his thing with them. Someone else got him after that, David DiMasquita. I don't think David, I'll say he didn't have enough time, to really get to know his body and be able to push him, because Keon came in and got 15th or 16th at the Olympia. Now, I'm sorry, but on Keon's worst day, he should never be outside top 3 at Olympia. Like, that's just the kind of caliber genetics he has. So they really missed the boat on that one. He fires him. He goes on the Patrick Tour. They got it figured out. So I think, and from what Keon looked like last year at this time to this year, 2 weeks out at the Olympia, he's already in better condition. So I think it's going to be an amazing show for him.
I do think it's his show to lose. I do think that he's literally with his waist, he's redefined the division, but I don't. It's hard to see that because Sean Clarita is. I mean, they compared him against Big Ramy the other year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he can hang. He's got so much freaking mass packed on his frame that I think he's still. I mean, he's still a threat, man. Like this.
Oh, he's still a threat.
He's still a big
I'll
threat.
say this about Sean is that, and I think what really hurt him last year was his midsection.
Yeah, midsection was
like, especially against a guy like Keon who's so blessed with a tiny, 27-inch waist or whatever.
And I think that was like the first time we saw Clarita like a little off. That's what it was. It wasn't like an intentional. It's not like he ate too much in the off season.
Yeah, he wasn't off in a condition aspect because he was every bit as dry and hard and lean as he was in previous Olympias. It's just that I think the ab wall grew. I really think
You think
the
it was?
wall. Yes, and I think that in their camp, what I'm hearing is that was the major focus this year. He might be a pound or two. You know, we always talk about like, oh, I'm going to put on 5 pounds of muscle, and if I gain 2 inches on my shoulder width and lats, but I only gain 1 inch on my waist, my taper's still getting better. I think they've tried that route and they've realized, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't need to put that 2 inches on the shoulders and lats. Like we actually need to just go back to the system of getting you back a little bit smaller, because in the hopes of not training your abs, bringing your ab wall down, that kind of stuff. So
yeah. And if he's had all year just to work on that, you know, I want to give Sean as much credit as I possibly can. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's like he's come from so far to get where he is.
No one works
today.
harder.
Yeah.
No one works harder in that division, like in my opinion. I know Sean personally. I don't know Keon as well, but I know Sean works his ass off, and I'm a huge fan of him. I'm just trying to be as objective as possible as a, you know, someone who watches the sport, you know.
Agreed. Yeah. And I don't know Keon as well either. I will say this, from just a little bit of interaction that I've had with him and his fiance, just mild, like his fiance commented on our show the other week because we talked about him. And she's like, oh, thanks a lot. You know, we're putting a lot. Just that went so far with me. I felt like, wow, these guys are really down to earth. Yeah. You know, they're not like the like their crap doesn't stink kind of attitude. So that made me instantly, I was like, even more of a fan seeing
Keon,
that,
if you're listening, you have my glucometer I lent you at the Olympia a couple years ago. I want it
back. You can keep it. We'll buy it. We'll buy Andrew a new one. All right, let's bring this thing in, guys. Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill, Andrew Barry, and myself, Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by you. Thank you to everybody from Patreon. We're leading the show with a Patreon question today. Guys, I call this like a knowledge transfer. Skip's been coaching for over 20 years. That literally means that, Skip, you've literally, I know you want to be humble, but you've seen thousands of people, help them transform their physiques. Andrew and I aren't really that far behind you. I know, Andrew, you've been coaching for about 15 years. I'm at 14, 15, and I've been coaching full-time for 10. So we have a lot of insight, and we're here to happily share that with you guys. We're also brought to you by supplementsource.ca for Canadians. Great deals that change week to week. And, of course, truenutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there for high-quality, third-party tested supplements by the creator of DC Training, Dante Trudell. Great company. You can trust them. We put our word on that. Use our code THINK. Guys, what's going on?
It's Wednesday, recording day.
Well, technically for us, yes. For them, it's Friday, right?
I mean, it's Friday,
yeah,
end of the week.
Yeah.
Feels like a Wednesday, but it's a Friday.
Yeah, I misspoke there. Yeah. Skip, how were you with the hurricane? Did you get anything at all?
I didn't. It was just pretty much a normal rainy day with a little bit of wind. Yep. Nothing too bad. You got it. I saw a couple pictures. You got it.
Yeah, my backyard had bunch of trees and limbs and stuff. It took us all afternoon to clear out, but then part of my fence came down. I lost a good branch of my areca palm tree, but I'm blessed, dude. Like just 5 miles down the road, like my buddy Ryan, he's a client of mine. He had like a foot of water in his place. He's sending me videos on Thursday night, and it was too late for me to go get him because he's across the bridge. And they would shut down the bridge. You couldn't get over there because I was like, well, I'll come pick you up if I can. Like if you can get anywhere near the bridge, I'll come grab you. But I'm like, I don't know how you're going to get across, you know? So he had to tough it out the whole night. He was up all night bailing water out of his house, that kind of thing. His place is completely ruined. He actually stayed with us for a few days. I had another client come stay with us because she was without power for a few days. So we were kind of a halfway house for a little while. But yeah, all's good over here. No damage, no money lost. So,
right.
That storm went up into up the East Coast, and they don't get enough. Here's the thing with the hurricanes, and I agree on this because a lot of people were complaining about this. Florida gets a lot of attention, Louisiana, wherever there's landfall, as far as damage and media exposure and arguably maybe even federal aid. I'm not sure how that works, but that storm did not stop once it left Florida. It wreaked havoc, with flooding. And of course, I knew it was going to be bad when they said that the surge was going to be upwards of almost 25 miles inland. I was like, oh, this one's not messing around. We've been fortunate. We've been down here 7 years. We've not had a direct hit yet.
Yeah, Dusty's all flooded out right now. Everything.
And that's
his
actually
neighborhood's
where
good.
I saw it.
His neighborhood's good. He's in South Carolina.
Okay, so South Carolina, North Carolina, like Asheville, North Carolina, got it really bad.
He's not far from Asheville, so
yeah,
I think a little south.
I think we had like 11 people died in Florida, but I think between the Carolinas, they had an extra 120 between the two of them that were dead or missing. So yeah, pretty tragic.
Well, listen, guys, we got a bunch of questions, and I wanted to throw this out there to our viewers on YouTube. Guys, if you want to take part in our shows, then you can comment with your questions, and we'll happily tackle them. I'm going to grab one from Casey, who's a guy that I work with. He posted this one over at Patreon. He said, for BSG, is there a trend now to keeping the fats as low as possible during a prep, such as 20 grams max from fish oil only, with a higher use of carbs?
Before you go off, because I want you to run with this first, Andrew, I want to say this one thing first, because I think it's important. Take 20 grams of fish oil and try not to shit your pants.
It's like 20 caps.
I don't know, dude. I've done it. Let me go back for a second, because in 2014, I was doing, let's say, I think it was more like 18, but 18 grams, no big difference. My digestion was fine, and my bowel movements, everything was fine.
Did you just start with it, or did you incrementally increase it? Wow.
So I was doing an intense, quick story, I did like a really harsh cycle where I combined 2 nandrolones, and you can guess what they were, with testosterone and some other stuff. And then I pulled my labs like 6 weeks into it, and I was like mortified at how bad my HDL had dropped and how much my LDL had shot up, and my apolipoproteins were like really skewed. So I was not, I was worried as much as a 20 whatever year old kid can be worried about his labs at that point in his life. So I'm like, all right, cycle's done. And I researched every single supplement, like even ones that might have had a lot of bias in terms of the research study, like polycosanol. I don't know if you remember that supplement, but like the country that stood to make all the money off polycosanol, because it was like everything was grown there, funded like all the studies on it, and basically threw out all the research that didn't do anything, but then only propped up, one of those things. And so I was even using like polycosanol, and I was using 20 grams or so of fish oil a day. But yeah, to answer your question, I went from like maybe 6 grams a day to 20, just like that. And
did you split it up, or did you take it all at once? Okay.
It was like 5 in terms of these, I think it was like Vitamin Shoppe liquid fish oil. And then I was taking like 4 or 5 capsules a day of something else too. So yeah. So, but I know what you're saying though, because I had the same fear in my head, and I'm like, well, I'm going to find out real quick if this is a good idea or not. And it worked out for me, but
I knew a forward thinking psychiatrist who, this is like 15 years ago. He would make sure his clients were all on 12 to 15 grams of fish oil before he would treat them with an SSRI. Like they always tried that first. Serotonin is produced in the gut, and the healthy fats will help with that production. So he always went that route first, which, most doctors go straight to the Prozac.
Sure. I would at least trust that doctor a lot more to have my best interests at heart, that he wasn't just going to push a drug at you and it's like, well, let's try nutraceuticals. Let's try changing your nutrition first. I would 100% listen to that guy. Yeah. But anyway, back to the question at hand. We talk about trends in bodybuilding, and I think this person is saying that there's this new trend with bodybuilding dieting in terms of getting ready for a show to pull your fats really low and to ride a higher carb diet and then kind of titrate your carbs down as you go. The news flash on this one is that it just kind of go for in the 80s and 90s. That's how everybody dieted back then. I mean, you guys will probably agree with me that when you got your first diet, or you wrote your first diet, or you read the Flex magazine on what the top pros were doing, first thing they did was pull all their steak and go with like lean chicken, fish. They would pull the avocado out. They'd pull all the fat sources out. Their carbs would be at X, and then they would just take the carbs away as they needed to get leaner and add the cardio as they needed to get leaner. So my point is that this isn't like a new trend in bodybuilding dieting. It's kind of come full circle. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I call it the Chris Aceto approach because I've
Yeah.
been around so long. That is a kind of a late '80s, I don't know, it's mid to late '80s, where we just had literally you would just your fat would just be as minimal as possible, and the carbs would be through the roof. And that was back in a time too where even protein really wasn't anywhere near what it shifted to into the latter '90s and early 2000s too. So there was a lot of carbs going on back then. So yeah, I'm with you. It's full circle. I mean, I don't know. I can't really add much. It's come around again, and it's come back. This has been I've seen it over the last couple of years, and I'm not against the higher carb. I was never huge on high fats, but I also like to have a good amount of fats in there. I personally have this kind of mental block cutoff, if you will. I don't like to go over 30% total calories with fat. I think once they get up higher, not per meal, but per day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there may be pro-fat meals in there and without carbs and putting carbs, around workouts, and it just depends on the person. But I don't like to go over that. Even loading, as far as skip loading or anything else. I don't like my clients to count fat intake. I don't like them to count calories, quite frankly, when they load. But I do want to make sure that I don't see anything that is skewed to where, half of their calories are coming. I don't want anybody sitting down to a plate of bacon and washing it down with a melted pint of Ben and Jerry's, if you will. So it still needs to be carb dominant and stuff. So yeah, I agree. It's not anything. I don't think it's anything new. It's new in the sense that the fat content isn't as high as it was 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. Would you guys agree with that?
I just do what I do what I do. Do you know what I mean? Like
I just mean in general. I don't mean our approach.
I don't even know.
You're talking about trends, Skip?
Yeah.
Just overall, like when clients come to you with, they already have their diet and they're showing you what what they've been doing for the last couple months, that sort of thing. I haven't seen that shift where they are and part of this too is insulin use. People, you're going to run a lot higher carbs too depending on insulin use and growth hormones. So
that's a good point.
There's other factors.
That is a good point. Too. Yeah, I mean, we'll touch on what you were going to say, Scott, because I probably want to echo it, but I think you were starting to say.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it because I was like, I don't really know what other people do. I just know what I do, and I do tend to go toward higher carbs, lower fats, and then I think if I were to reflect back 5 years, I would say my protein used to be higher than it is now. And I realized that maybe I was going a little bit overboard with it, and that we might even make better progress because obviously the calories are lower if the protein comes down a little bit than from where I had it. Meaning if I get rid of some of that protein, that might give us room for more fats or more carbs, which maybe we can make better use out of those things. But in general, I tend to be a high protein, high carb, low fat coach, I guess. That said, funny Casey asks that because everybody's completely individual, and with him, he's mostly protein fats. He hadn't been able to diet with carbs. In fact, like we try to add carbs back in, and I'm just when you're just kind of moving along with somebody, you're getting progress, and you feel like, okay, are we ready yet? Are we ready to get some carbs in there? And then all of a sudden the scale goes up and everything locks up because you tried carbs, and it takes 4 or 5 more days to get progress again. He's finally at a point now, like 3 weeks out, where we've been able to add in very minimal carbs to be able to start getting I almost see it as like we're at that stage where it's almost like throwing sticks on the fire, We're finally getting that fire blazing, but he predominantly has been protein fat throughout. But I don't pay attention in general, what other people are doing.
I kind of call that like sneaking calories in or sneaking carbs in. Whereas like, okay, so you got them on their protein fat diet, but maybe you're like, okay, I want you to cut up, a piece of like a clementine and throw that on your salad. So
we're going a little more than that, but yeah.
But you don't know what I'm saying. Well, especially with females though, that have this type of disposition where you got to sneak the carbs in. So like you might add 10 grams of carbs one week, and I'm talking 10 grams of carbs, and then next week, okay, we're gonna add another 10 grams of carbs, and now we're at a point where okay, we can add a half cup of rice and pull the fruit out, and you get a little bit more. And I'm saying you just kind of build the fire that way to where. slowly over time their metabolism is adjusting. But in terms of diets in general, I think it's important to, talking about carbs, fats, whatever, it's important to really look at your client's body's response, especially in the off season, to higher carb, lower carb, mixed meals, whatever it might be, because that can give you a lot of insight as to what's going to happen when you prep, and I like to say, like, I'm not dogmatic about being low fat or low carb or anything. Like, I just kind of take what you're doing at the time if you're a new client, and then I play with some things, and then I use insight and then do more of the stuff that's working and do less of the stuff that doesn't seem to be working. If you're a longer term client that I've had for many, many years, and not to say that physiques and bodies don't change over time, but they don't really change as much as they do from person to person. So you have some good insight when you've been working with someone for several years in the off season, in a contest prep. But I want to shift the topic a little bit for a second. Do you guys do any fat loading in we'll call it peak week, leading up to a show?
I want to make sure there's some fats in there. After talking with Scott Stevenson, there are triglyceride stores in the muscle, and that we can maximize those as well. And I think maybe I learned that early on when I thought to myself, like, well, we need more than just more carbs. Let's have a cheat meal. And I started seeing, like, well, maybe we had the same calories eating clean, but when he ate that burger and fries, he ended up getting more fats. And then obviously there's a sodium component to that too, right? But yeah, I do want to make sure that we are tapping that out, especially for somebody who's going to be more sensitive too, like Casey is going to be,
Yeah, I don't know that I load. That was going to be my question. What do you mean by loading? Like, as an example, Scott Abel, he had more of his loading for shows was both carb loading and fat loading, but it had a sequence. And I don't want to give that away because I don't know that I remember it as well, so I don't want to misrepresent it. Yeah. Even though Scott and I have a history, and I don't like the guy, and he genuinely doesn't like me either. Mine is more warranted than his, but whatever. It's usually one-sided in this industry.
Shots fired.
Yeah, exactly. Scott's like 80 now. I'm sure he's like in a nursing home somewhere, so he's probably not watching the podcast. I don't know how old he is, but he's older than me, and I'm 72, so he's probably. You can't go after a guy who took a shot at himself, too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a defense; it's an offense. But I do add fats. Typically, what I'll do is, and here's an example, because you guys know me. I've given away a lot of information over the years, free information. That's why I always find it funny when we get trolled, because I'm like, oh wow, you came to the site to get free information where we spoon feed it to you. But then you don't like the way it's given to you. I'm too verbose. Oh, he talks too much. Oh, he's got a shitty sense of humor. It's like, God, I'm sitting here feeding you like a baby with fucking food. But anyway, I will bring in, and so I'm not going to be like incredibly detailed, but I'll say this. Once the carbs come in and we have you to a fullness that we're good with, we want to ride it for a couple days, typically that's when I'll pull back the carbs and I'll increase the fat to kind of keep the calories balanced. To me, not entirely, but that tends to ride and hold the fullness, versus if you just maintain the carbs and then they kind of fall off a little bit because your metabolism is still rolling. The fat, I think, tends to feed, not a ton of it, but enough that it will keep you from, it's almost kind of, for lack of a better term, almost kind of carbohydrate or glycogen sparing in a sense. And especially for the last couple of days when you're sitting around and the activity isn't very high anyway. Because obviously if you're still doing, your light workouts, it's early in the week. I don't know how you guys handle it with training, but I call it, it's fluff. They're fluff workouts. It's stretch and squeeze. It's get a pump. Yeah, exactly. Don't injure yourself. Nothing massively heavy. Basically, get in, get the pump, get your ass out before you drop a plate on your foot or pull something or do something stupid that otherwise wouldn't happen. So, yeah, I do. I bring them in later in the week, if at all possible. Again, it's an individual type thing, but yeah, I do that. Loading. I don't know if I call it loading, but nonetheless, they weren't there before, and they are.
I would consider it loading as if if you are specifically taking a day or several days to push a certain macronutrient over the others.
Okay.
You know, like for instance, like, you know, we always used to read, and maybe we all tried it, like carb depletion, right?
Sure.
And now, you know, like, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you might be carb depleting, and then half of Wednesday and Thursday and most of Friday, you're carb loading. That I think that's like the old fashioned or the traditional carb up method, right?
Yeah.
And it comes from models on aerobic sports of all things too, which is kind of funny. But no, fat loading, in my opinion, is like you on those carb depletion days, let's say like Monday, Tuesday, you're driving your carbs down next to nothing, but you're replacing those calories with fats. So your glycogen levels are going down, but you're taking that opportunity to fill your tag score, your triglyceride stores intercellularly. So you're loading your fat stores, and then you are taking the next couple days to load your glycogen stores via carbohydrates. Another way to do it is, if you're someone that holds water, say on carbohydrates, is you would do the reverse. You would carb load earlier in the week, and like Monday, Tuesday, maybe some of Wednesday, and then you'd switch over and really pull those carbs down as much as you feel like you need to a baseline level, and then switch over to mostly protein and fats.
And that sounds like what Skip's saying, and that's what I generally do too.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
But okay. Gotcha. So yeah, I mean, it's all everything in our sports is semantics, right? Like how you do.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want him to misunderstand. Yeah, I don't want someone listening to misunderstand and go, "Oh, Skip said to he
says he never does that. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
He doesn't like Scott Abel, but he'll have his clients eat cheesecake so they can get a lot of fat." So I'm not like loading like a burger and fries, every equivalent type of fat to where it's excessive. The one thing I will say is I think that increasing the fat is very, very safe, especially the day before, because if you're listening to this, whether you're new or you're not new and you just have those things locked into your brain, please don't think that eating in excess of calories in one day is going to impact you and be stored as body fat the following day, because that's not how it works. You eat carbs in excess, you may deal with water from spilling and things, but it's not going to be from eating excessive fat. Your body will not store body fat that quickly.
The thing I look out for when we're making that switch from protein carbs to protein fats is I look for digestion issues. Like, is it starting to slow down? Are you starting to feel like heavier between meals? Do you feel like there's like any distension happening, any pressure? That's my main concern that I would look out for. Other than that, I think it's safe. Protein fat, I think, is safe.
Yep. I wouldn't eat a lot of nuts or a lot of cheese, because if you think you're already going to be bound up from the show after drying out and everything else, add those foods in, and you might have to dig in there with a fork to get everything going on Sunday or Monday. It's not a very good. Was that a good visual? That was a good visual.
What's wrong with you? I mean, no, but I mean, my favorite thing to do is absolutely nothing. I'll be honest. Like, you look friggin' amazing on Saturday. We're going to ride your previous week's diet out, maybe pop off a little bit with a few more carbs to make you as full as you could be without any spillage. Maybe pull a little bit of water just to make sure you're a little bit drier if need be at all. And then get on stage as if it's almost a regular Saturday versus all this micro minutia manipulating this. And honestly, the best thing to do, if you gather nothing from this podcast today, the best thing you can take from it is be in shape early, because you could try all of these things and they all will work to some extent, and you will not be unhappy with what you do. If you're peeled at 2 weeks out, it's really hard to mess it up.
Yeah, I'd agree. And that's putting the homework in early, not because there's only so many weeks that, or you can only get so lean in X amount of weeks. So start dieting a month before what you think you need to. That's
There's nothing wrong with that too. Because like when people like kind of get pushback, like, you want me to start my prep at 20 weeks out? It's like, well, I'd rather you start at 30 weeks out. But but I know you can't go 30 weeks without a free meal, possibly. So it's like, I mean, I'll be honest. I had a girl start her prep 52 weeks out because gave her free meal, things always went downhill. So I'm like, look, if we're gonna get on stage, like, we're gonna pull your free meals out 52 weeks out of the from the show. So your whole year out, are you ready for this? Because I think that's the only way you're really realistically going to be able to get on stage. And we're going to do a very slow diet, so you're not feeling fatigued too quick, too early. And it's going to be a very slow. You're going to have refeeds, you're going to have all that, and eventually we might be able to fit a free meal in. But the regular weekly free meal, we were spending all week gaining and losing the same 2 to 3 pounds just over and over again with no real progress. And so sometimes you just got to know your people, and you got to come up with a plan that's specific for them, because it's not like everybody I would do that with. But some people, it's like you just can't get away with them, because you go one burger and fries turns into a whole Sunday's worth of eating the next day, and we just can't get back on plan. So
and even for people that maybe have better metabolisms, if we start earlier, like here's the thing. I realized that one thing I've changed in coaching in the last several years, 5 years maybe, has been that I don't really have a definitive point where I say, okay, now we're no longer focusing on muscle growth, and now we're starting prep. And a lot of people, especially people I haven't worked with before, they're like, okay, well, when does the prep start? And sometimes it's like, well, we kind of already been in it for the last 8 weeks. And it doesn't mean we can't have even stay still like a cheat meal, but maybe for you that might mean let's hold off this week. Let's see if we can just get a little bit tighter this week, or let's just keep going without that load, at the end of the week, and then let's see what happens. Maybe we go to every other week, maybe it becomes every 3 weeks, or maybe it's still every week, but we have the rest of the food is lower. I think for me, it's no longer been a definitive line of, okay, off season's over and prep starts, as much as it is like a transition over time.
Because people want a date on the calendar. Prep
and I understand that.
My mindset is locked in, and it's like, well, if we can encourage that mindset to be locked in from the minute you get off stage the last time, whether it's a year ago, 2 years ago to now. And I tell every athlete, like, the minute you start treating yourself like a contest prep athlete in the off season is when you will really start to make more progress. And like, the proof's in the pudding with the amount of people I've had get pro cards after just adopting that. They hit a first call out at a national show and they're like, okay, I'm good, I can do this. And then their mindset was, their check-ins were perfect for 52 weeks straight. Going into the show, we do the same show a year later, and they go and win a pro card. And it's not like I magically became a better coach, or like I magically gave them a super drug or anything. It's just that their mindset switched into like, we're no longer just serious during contest prep. I'm serious year round. And like you're saying, Scott, it's just kind of like, what word did you use? You're kind of
it's like a transition. It's a slow transition from one phase to the next. It's we can still even be in a phase where we're still gaining muscle. We just aren't pushing the food as high. We're trying to be mindful of the fact that, okay, in 35 weeks, can we have you in shape? Yep. Okay, then let's keep the food where it is.
Exactly.
Let's not reduce anything.
The only thing I do a little bit different is I will still give the date. There's a hard and fast date, but sometimes it's or for start of a prep. Okay. But 4, 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, I may start prior to that with the changes that I would make coming into the prep. So what it does is it almost always begs the question right around the start date, well, what are we going to change? And if they've been progressing like they would in prep, the answer is typically nothing. We're not changing anything. You've basically been prepping over the last 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks. They're like, oh.
I guess you can tell them you can start wearing stringer tank tops now, or you can start,
exactly.
I get it though. People want that motivation, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
What about this one here? George has one in the live stream. Got a couple of them in the live stream. Guys, let's talk about intra-workout carbs and saving money. So like the past 10, 15 years, intra-workouts become super popular. It's a great way to support pre-workout insulin use. It's great for recovery, and it's great for endurance in those long workouts. Here's the thing. It's really expensive. It's not only expensive for us, it's expensive for supplement companies. They really don't make a lot of money off of it. That's where True Nutrition comes in. So True Nutrition, they're not only a retailer, they're also a manufacturer. They're actually making a lot of the products that you guys are already buying from other companies. So just think about it. You're going to cut out the middleman. The only thing you're going to miss out on is the fancy labels and the branding. Outside of that, you're getting the exact same high quality products, but you're getting it directly from the source. If you're going to pay for the price of highly branched cyclic dextrin, ensure that you're getting 25 grams per scoop, not of a mix of carbs, but just of highly branched cyclic dextrin. We can mix the other stuff in later, Use our code THINK, get some savings, plus it's like voting for us. It lets them know that you support what we're doing. He says, what's up, guys? Wait, where's the wrong one? He had something about reps and... there it is, with training. What do you guys think with the trends, training, reps and reserve, volume, tempo, etc. for older advanced guys? Do you believe in frequency of body parts or just one time a week? We've kind of talked about this before, but we could revisit it for a minute.
Run with it.
So for older advanced guys, and I guess, are we saying advanced guys in terms of like their physiques are really built, or they're just old? That's what I'm kind of confused about, because advanced guys are so honed into their training on what works and what doesn't work that they just know how to auto-regulate what they're doing. Like a guy who has 10, 12 years of training experience and who has built his quads from 20 inches to 30, he knows what works for his legs. So he's probably not going to deviate from what has worked unless he has an injury in which he's working around, or he's noticing that his recovery is getting worse as he ages, which is quite often a thing, So it's kind of hard to answer that, because, like, do you believe in frequency of body parts or just once a week? Well, and we talk about this all the time. Like, let's say someone still has a weak chest after 15 years of training, and they built a high level physique. Maybe they're an IFBB pro even. They built a high level physique, but it's always their chest is the weak point. And they've tried, Dante's DC training. They've tried reps and reserve. But what really comes down to, I think, is they're going to try to channel all the recovery to that body part. Like, that's going to be the main the main body part that they're focusing all their other training variables around. Whether they're just hitting it once a week or they're trying to hit it a little bit more frequently, which in that case means they need to pull volume and frequency back from other body parts to divert that recovery to that body part. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. And I guess, older advanced just mean old, or is it like older advanced guys that have built a really good physique? That's kind of my question on that.
Yeah. I like the talk of like tempo stuff, and that's one of the things with advanced guys that I've tried to work on a lot. Some of them are they really get it, and other guys they find it to be like it takes away from their fun. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you'll take one guy and you'll say like, hey, what I want you to do is like, let's do a really slow negative here, a hard squeeze at the top, a pause at the bottom. And they love it. And they're like, oh yeah, I love this. This is like, it's a next step. My thought is that if we can better control that muscle under tension, under like massive tension, then we're only going to be better activating it. We're going to end up getting better growth. I've seen it happen, but it doesn't work for everyone, because some people, it's just not what they want to do,
Yeah, I don't like the counting. I don't like which is funny because you guys know me as a very black and white OCD person, especially when it comes to training and all things bodybuilding. But I don't like the counting. I don't like paying that much attention. I think it's actually overthinking. It's overkill. You just need to... I think it's better to go in with the idea or the approach of how hard can I make this muscle work during this set? At the same time, not limiting yourself to 4 reps. So there's a balance on both sides. Coach Casson had a good Instagram post over just the last couple of days where he was focusing on time under tension. He tries to put black and white measures around things to help people to understand. And that part of what he does, I really do like. A lot of all the other angles and things like that, I think sometimes can be a little over the top. If I see someone doing a side lateral that is at this angle and it activates more from the stretched position, I just look at it and I go, no one is going to do that. No one's going to get big doing that because no one has done that before. That's just, you didn't find some miracle thing. But I understand the point that he's making. There are positions that are more advantageous, but then that's one part of the whole exercise. But anyway, I think if you just go in with the idea of how hard can I make? I've said it before. I don't look at bodybuilding as, we don't lift weights from point A to point B. That's powerlifting. we use weights. So where it's important to train as heavy as you can, what does that mean? It's subjective, it's relative, it's going to be different for everybody. But I know too that when you hold back the weight, or you give up a little bit of the weight for control and focusing more on tempo and time under tension, that will make the muscle work harder the vast majority of the time. It removes momentum. It doesn't remove, but it substantially decreases the risk of injury. So there's not as much of a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And, I've said this a million times, and I'm still going to say this until the moment I go into the ground. There's no benefit, even if training heavier was more beneficial for muscle growth. If you're taking one step forward and two steps back for injuries and tweaks, itis issues, things like that, over the long haul, you're not progressing as much as if you can hold back a little bit on the weight. Because I've said a million times, I'll say again, I don't think that it's intensity that creates injury. I think it's literally usually too much weight. We can get into warm-ups and we can get into nagging things that are specific situations for each person. But primarily, it usually comes down to it's just too much weight. So intensity, I don't think, does that, provided that mechanics, that your form is solid, that the muscle is warm, and the muscle's ready to go.
Well, what about if someone is using too much weight with intensity, though? Like, because here I'm thinking of an example in my head. Viz has got a really good bodybuilder that goes to our gym, Noah, and the kid is freaky strong, freaky strong. Yeah, 5 plates for 20 reps on a squat. So you can imagine how much you could do for 8, right?
Yeah.
But he was on the Cybex hip press. You know that machine, the leg press. It's like a hip press, they call it, though.
Yeah.
And I think he had the thing probably 12 plates aside, and he was doing 20 reps with it. And he was, it's a lot of weight, and his intensity was through the roof. It was like an all-out crazy set. And its crazy thing is, you're watching on the video, you can see the minute his adductor snapped or tore.
Oh God!
Because his knee just caved in, and you could see his knee move in just enough that it was different. My point is that he was so locked in and being intense, but he was also using too much weight. And the funny thing is because Phil sent him to come train with me and Nate for a while to kind of try to teach him to harness that a little bit. Yeah, dude, you're freaky strong, but now you need to channel that strength in the right way with control. Yeah. Like you're talking about, Scott, with the tempo and taking more time in the eccentric, not just being so ballistic with it. And this kid was being crazy ballistic with how he was doing the leg press. So I think it's a combination, though, because you get into one of those sets where you're just going and going, the intensity's through the roof. I feel like you can kind of get away from yourself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is in some cases the intensity can be the injury or the driver of injury.
But you just said that it was with that heavy poundage, and that's exactly. I agree. I completely agree. If the intensity wasn't there, but the time under tension was more the focus, or he was going into the set going, okay, I'm going to back off to 9 plates per side, but I'm going to focus more on rep tempo. That is still, to me, that's still intensity. I know.
I was trying to think of the right word, because you could be intense by doing 3-second negatives and 2-second eccentrics with a full pot. You could totally be intense that way. And then there's that ballistic intensity that's just
See, and I don't like the ballistic approach. That's what I think is one of the biggest vulnerabilities. If he were doing very controlled eccentric, and again, not counting, I understand you're trying to put a number on it so that people understand the type of pace or tempo that we're talking about. I totally get that. But then in explaining that, to give the idea, I don't want people, or specifically my clients, to go and go, okay, was that 3? I'm counting the seconds while I'm doing the reps.
You know what, though?
In that muscle, just digging into that muscle, that should be the focus.
It's a training thing, Skip, though, I think, because I've used the time thing for years now. Shelby did it. That's where we started. We did 4-second, not just 4 count, but 4-second, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. And you have to say 4, 1,000 right when you're going to say 5. That's the end of the 4th second. So it's some of that stuff. But when I first would do it, it felt cumbersome. and it was difficult, but over time it just becomes part of your repertoire, part of, like, you don't have to think about it. But you're right, that one of the main reasons that I tell people, like, I'll put a number on it, like, let's do a 4 count, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, drive at 4. Then we're on the same page. You know, if I tell somebody, like, I want you to just make sure you really feel the muscle and the negative, working the negative as hard as you can, it's
open interpretation.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
not
I
as black and white, sure.
I like that, and I found too, even for myself, even if I stopped using it over time, when I was first trying to figure out how to do the pull down, when I retaught myself pull downs, I would do a 1 second pause at the top of every rep. And so I'd get up to the top from the point that it actually settled, and I felt like, okay, all the centrifugal force, all the momentum's gone. Then I began counting 1,000, drive. I found that over time, I didn't need to use a full second to get that pause. But by doing it for like months and months and months, I programmed myself to actually get the stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I would watch videos like a year later, and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not doing the full pause anymore, that full 1 second pause. But now I've programmed myself to make sure that I get that full stop. So I think it is just like a teaching thing. And I guess my argument would be that over time, it just becomes part of your repertoire. It's not as cumbersome as when you're first trying to do it.
Well, look at it this way. Doing a 3 or 4 second or 4 count negative is harder than just a random person doing their eccentric reps, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, so that right there in itself is a growing tool. It's increasing time under tension. Because I remember I'd bring guys in the gym. We were doing leg press. I remember this guy in particular. He couldn't get that concept down. When I'm like, no, slow the eccentric down. In your head, go 1, 2, 3, and then when you finish saying 3 in your head, that's when you drive. And it was like 1, 2, boom. And I'm like, no, Armin, like slow it down. Like I'll count it out loud for you. And we did this exercise like for 5 minutes, and I just lost my mind. I'm like, dude, you can't get this? Like, seriously? Because he was also addicted to the weight that he was using, because we had to take 30% off of what he was using. So anything you got to take weight off of, automatically it's harder. You're doing it because it's harder, right? Which in my mind, it gives you another stepping stone to get to, because when you get back to your working weight that you were using before with, we'll call it regular form, after now adding in that 3 second or 4 second eccentric, there's a lot of growth to be had in there.
Absolutely. And what I find too is with people like that guy, that there's some people that pick it up really fast, some people that don't. And the way I always imagine it is that we're creating like a new neural pathway. You know, if we were to go in the gym, skip and like do something, and I was like, hey, I'm going to show you how I do this thing, like, I couldn't expect that you would get exactly what I was talking about the first time. You might, because some people who are advanced, actually, you guys would probably get it real fast, especially people who maybe were athletes previously, or guys with a lot of experience, they might get it quicker. But you've also done, how many times have you done a pull down in your life? How many reps have you done? It's like literally thousands and thousands. So you've created that, like, imagine walking through the woods. You've just created a path. And now I'm asking you, hey, instead of doing the take the path you always take, let's create a new path. It takes time to create that new like neural pathway to make it work. And some people, they get it in, 4 tries. Other people, it's longer. Other people, they get it right away,
Right. I think a better way for me to explain it is this, and I'll be quick so we can move on. If you're doing 3 second negatives, and you get 12 reps. You do 6 second negatives, but you only get 6. I think it's exactly the same thing.
Because of the time under tension.
Yeah. And I think, and I wonder this, I'm asking you guys this, and not only you, but I would ask the listeners to ask themselves the same question. Are you considering time under tension only the negative or the entire set? Because I'm looking at it as the entire set. So I don't like, as an example, I won't have my negative and positive or eccentric and concentric be the same, but I am very rhythmic. So I'm not ballistic when for one over the other, or for the positive or the negative. But I'm probably closer than most, with the exception of a few things. Like if I were to do that, say, on lat pulls, probably wouldn't work that well. But if I do it on chins, okay, cool. T-bar row. To me, a T-bar row is more of a, I don't want to say a ballistic, because ballistic to me implies that it's very powerful and it's very bam. And anytime you're doing something like a T-bar row or something, then you're going to get into lower back movement, hip movement,
just
stuff
get
like
control.
that.
It's controlled
Sure.
fall is the way I look at it.
I always call it controlled
fall.
chaos. It's my thing that my clients know this term, controlled chaos. It's the intensity comes from the fact that it's psychological, not viewing it like, oh my God, like, oh, he's over there just banging away. I don't look at it. It's internal. So that's why I refer to it as controlled chaos, because it's still intense from the chaos standpoint. There's a lot going on in your brain, but there's less going on visually from the outside looking in. You're not seeing this type of thing.
Yeah.
It's internal.
Well, I just sent Scott something from, I don't know if you guys know who Mark Hector is. He's a pro bodybuilder from the UK. And I sent one of his Instagram stories because I saw his reps for almost every exercise, and it's kind of what we're talking about. It might be good to put up there if you can, Scott.
Got it.
And I think in terms of speed, cadence.
I love that stretch. I love that stretch.
See, and I love that. That to me is, and I do this with clients. I'll send them a video of me doing something versus counting. And I'm not saying counting is wrong. All I'm saying is I prefer not to be that black and white with it, because I don't think a 3-second negative, personally, just me, is necessarily any worse or any better than one that's a little bit slower than that if you're not getting as many reps. Yeah. And I think that's what Coach Cassim was touching on. He was showing graphs about how essentially just trying to put a measure around it. And he said what I felt, which doesn't happen very often with a lot of people, but the time under tension, reps and sets are a very black and white measure of time under tension. When you think about, like, the body doesn't know how many reps you've done.
No.
It knows the time under tension. It doesn't know how many sets you've done. It knows a cumulative time of being under tension for that particular session. And I thought it was actually a really good explanation, and it's important for people who do get locked into that, because we do it subconsciously, psychologically, we do it without thinking about it. We want more reps.
He's coached by
But
Cuba.
in doing that, we want more time under tension. So if you're going to slow it down and you're not going to get as many reps, that doesn't mean that, it's not as intense. Again, bringing it back to my original point and tying it back in is just that's why I believe that intensity is so much better for those two reasons. Number one, it will still build muscle. I think at the same pace, arguably, if not better. And I'm a good example of this because I'm old, and yet I curl half of what I used to curl 15 years ago, and my arms are bigger now at 54 than they were then. So there's just, I can think back to my biggest numbers in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And by 2015, I was bigger, and I was not curling as much. I was not pushing. I mean, I haven't overhead pressed probably 225, and I don't know how long. So
I was holding this. I want to say, though, the reason I want to be able to have the time on it is so that we can, because we'll logbook it. Well, and if we're going to logbook it, then I want to know, were my reps 3 seconds or were they 6 seconds? I guess from what you're saying, imagine this, Skip. What if you were to say, hey, I'm going to take 100 pounds and I'm going to row it I've been rowing it for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I'm going to row it for 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Like, literally, you could, by our conversation, like, we've never thought of progressing that way, but you could progress that way. You know what I mean?
But here's the point that I would drive. Your example is just, I would use a better example, because I don't want anybody listening to go, 100 pounds, no one's going to be big on 100 pounds. Let's do this. Let's say you normally row 275.
Okay.
But you come down to, say, 195, or even 200 or 205. That way, if the time under tension is significant and there's far more control with the eccentric and concentric, then I would argue that's not only safer, but over time you can build from that. And the intensity is still there, but the amount of weight that you're moving. So RDLs are another good example, because I firmly believe that 90% of people use too much weight with their RDLs.
Agreed.
That it's just not an efficient movement. And I think you could take that into damn near any other movement as well. Side lateral is another good example.
I use next to nothing on RDLs. I'm talking like,
do you?
Like if we do a Smith machine RDL, we do like 2 plates, maybe 2 1/4 if we're feeling frisky, but like, yeah, and sometimes even less. Lately, we've been doing them on the Pit Shark. You guys ever do them on the Pit Shark?
Yeah, yeah.
I have. It's been a long time because I don't train in a commercial gym anymore.
Yeah.
One thing I'll give to people as a takeaway too, when we just talk about all of this, one thing, I don't care what level you're at, and this is especially for the new people. Ron Partlow has a term that he uses. He calls it robot reps, where he wants all of his reps to look the same. And if you ask yourself, are all your reps the same? Because what I see a lot of guys that are starting to work with me and they send me a set, they've got like 5 of them that are faster and then 3 slow ones and then a couple of half reps. And, maybe one was a slow negative and one was a fast negative. And it's like, if you were to just take the time to uniform your reps, that in itself, I think, gets the exact point we're talking about. You're doing something that's going to put more control over the weight, the same weight that you're using. Just all the reps, make them all look the same. You'll grow with that alone.
I agree with that almost completely. But like for instance, what about like say John Meadows, big on say full rep hamstring curls, and then once you fatigue at say 12 or 15 reps, doing partials from the stretch position.
I would call
12 reps.
I would call
you say that's
that
almost
an intensifier.
Yeah. Okay. Same here. Okay. Never mind. Then we're on the same wavelength.
Because I see
if
people
you were
that are
log booking, go ahead.
I see people that are like, maybe they say they got 10 reps, but the last 4 of them, they were only pulling it 3/4 of the way.
That's
yeah.
That's where I was going.
I would
you
count.
only can count the full reps.
The full reps, yeah. Like if we were doing a set of 12 and then adding 10 or 12 partials, I would say it was a set of 12. Right?
Yeah. I'm talking about like, say, and also like speedier negatives, through the standard set. If you're going to do, like I've done that stuff too. I think, those are some great intensifiers, but yeah, like, let's not have like the first 4 reps you have good control in your negatives, and then the last 4 it's falling. It's like
I want to touch on the logbook part real quick, where you said you were logging the time, you were logging the reps and the weight. I'm all about logbooking, but I will throw in this argument where I think that it isn't anywhere near as necessary as it used to be. If you are doing 100-pound dumbbell presses and you get 9, and you back off to 80s and you get 7 because your time under tension is better, I don't think the time under tension matters if you train to failure. If you go to failure, why do you have to log and wonder if failure is failure? To me, that's how I approach it. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's more like a topic of discussion, but I just look at failure as failure. So why am I like I'll log that I went to failure. I'll log it in my brain.
But the more muscle, the more weight that you can move, the bigger you will grow. I would argue that a stronger muscle is going to be a bigger muscle.
But if you're focusing more on time under tension, then you lose the black and white.
Oh, you mean if you cleaned it up? You mean if you cleaned it up? But
Scott's coming from a place though. Every rep is already uniform, right? So you're saying every rep is already uniform, and if you got 8 reps last week with 200 pounds, and this week you did 205, and you also got 8, that's a positive adaptation.
I completely agree. What I'm saying is when we get into time under tension and we get into really controlling the reps, it makes analyzing progress from a logbook standpoint difficult to do. When let's say you're ballistic, and back in the DC days, a lot of guys were ballistic. You get an extra rep. Okay, you are arguably strong because you're training all those sets all those reps ballistically anyway. We didn't focus on time under tension then. We focus on we want good mechanics, but we didn't focus on that time under tension. I think once you bring time under tension, it does make it difficult to track that black and white, which is exactly why we use weights and reps. It's a measure around,
Let me add to that, because working with Dante personally, like he was big on honing. Like when I tell you I got my first training plan from him, it was like 6 full long emails. Like every workout, there were 6 workouts, and every one was like a book on, he took the time to write out exactly how he wanted the reps done, where he wanted your shoulders, how he wanted your elbows positioned, and the cadence of, I want you to think in your head, 1, 2, 3, drive. And I want every single rep to be that way. Now, when we're getting to a point where, let's say, you know, your DC set, you're somewhere, you've been at 15 reps and you're trying to get to that 16th rep, and that 16th rep is a little bit more ballistic in nature than the previous 15. You would make a note of that. And so you'd be like 15 plus, you know what I'm saying? So like in your head, you're like, when you go and look at that logbook, you're like, okay, I got 15 plus 1 ballistic rep. I'm going to really work on cleaning that 16th rep up to make it a true 16.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying? Like, so it's always adaptation in the positive, trying to work the same exact form and cadence that you're using on all previous attempts, so that you have a measurable. And I know what you're saying, Skip, too, because, well, if you hit failure, you know you hit failure, right? Like, and if you're using this, and I get both thoughts and both schools of camp, or both arguments there. I don't use a logbook now, so I'll just say that.
Neither
but it was
I.
very, very helpful to me from like 22 to 29 or so years of age.
Now, could it be argued that about 50%, I'm using an arbitrary number to make that point, 50% of people who did DC training would note that the last rep was ballistic?
Probably not, because they didn't go to the source and hire the guy that wrote the program.
Yeah. And then they would see that as progression, because that was my argument back when, if you're only married to the logbook, you can find ways to get another rep.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Two things. I mean, either people are really loving this right now, or they got bored of us 30 minutes ago.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, but we are really getting into training.
That's the one thing. I mean, the other thing is I really freaking wish Dante would be able to join us for something like this. I would love to hear how his thoughts have evolved now. Like, just hear him hash it out with us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what our discussion basically means and proves is it's incredibly nuanced.
Yeah.
Everybody, I get tired of hearing, just grab the weights and just, and I've said train your ass off, but I'm not going to oversimplify it and make it sound like that's all you need to do. It's incredibly, training is incredibly nuanced. But to bring it back full circle, I would say, Scott, I completely agree with you. If you get to the point, despite the amount of numbers that you're using, you get to the point where your reps are uniform, okay, cool. Then you're going to be able to gauge that progression. I don't look at a logbook, because I may have gone in last week and gotten 3 reps less with, on dumbbell presses with the same weight, but they felt so much better. I may have had better control that time. They might have been slightly slower, that sort of thing. So
let me add a caveat then. Would you guys agree that a logbook, like once you've had, say, 2 years of training where you came in and you just worked hard, right?
Right.
And then you start to use a logbook because you're starting to make your reps uniform, you're starting to get your cadence down. It can be beneficial then. But then when you kind of switch over to, you get a little bit older and you're really honed into how your body's feeling, your injuries, how that machine sticks on this thing. So what my point is that you gain wisdom with your training. And like, because Skip, you just used the example. Well, I got 3 less reps on the same exact weight, same exact exercise this week, but it felt even better, and I felt a better connection to my muscle, right? Mm-hmm. And you would argue that was just as good, if not better, of a workout than the workout previous. And I guess the point is that you get to a certain age, you don't worry about that number so much. You don't worry. You just worry about the intensity, going to failure, where you're hitting failure, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I couldn't agree more. Yeah,
it's wisdom.
You have other factors of, I did 3 sets prior to this exercise, so that's going to impact, too. Yeah. Or maybe, maybe at the last minute I felt like, I'm going to just all of a sudden drop them, and I'm going to drop down to, 80s and get another 4 or 5 intensity techniques factor into it too. So,
and you made that decision on because you're like, this feels good. I want to finish this set. That's wisdom. That's training wisdom.
Yep.
All right. Got a couple from Patreon. I'll try to get through these today. He says, Johan, he says, okay, question for, we asked this on drugs and stuff, and he says, and blood, sweat, and gear. I know this has been covered before, but I'm losing my mind and don't know what to do. Lower back pumps. I haven't been able to properly train legs for the last couple of weeks. After basically only 2 to 3 sets of Smith machine squats, my back is on fire and I have to leave the gym. I have tried taurine up to 10 grams a day with no change. Is losing weight the only option? I'm around 20 to 25% body fat. I naturally have quite a pronounced interior pelvic tilt, so my low back is pretty much always flexed and arched, if that has any effect on it. I gave him my thoughts in the last episode, or on the episode of drugs and stuff. You guys tell me if you have any other thoughts, and we'll see if we link up. We'll see if we have the same ideas.
Well, first I want to correct the position. It would be posterior, right? Not anterior. Okay. I just want to make sure, because I don't want anybody taking away wrong information. His ass is sticking out. His stomach is out. The gain in body weight, body fat, arguably volume of food can play into it. I do not train legs a day after a skip load for that reason. I've been injury free with my lower back for 9 years, and I'm not going to put it in a vulnerable position by having any type of distension. So I train legs on Thursdays. He's got to get leaner. I mean, that's number one. Number two is you can stretch them more to loosen them up, even in between. And I know this goes against, if there are people out there who are stretching gurus and they're going to say, oh, you don't stretch before. I do stretch before because it opens up my hips. I may not stretch to increase flexibility in those muscles, but I'm loosening them up to open up my hips, and it works, and it works beautifully. In between sets, as you get blood in there, you can still open up or continue to stretch, do minor stretching, but you got to get leaner, bro. Every time I herniated my L4, L5, I was over a specific weight, and it never happened under that weight. Now that's only me. I'm just using myself as an example. Get leaner. Get leaner.
I definitely agree with getting leaner. I think if you're a bodybuilder, 25% is not a good place to be. I mean, that's obese, right? And not like the bodybuilder obese where you just have so much muscle mass and your height and weight ratio is off. Like, that's obese. So you want to get your body weight down. But I think he's also focusing on the chemical side of things. Like you said, he added taurine powder and he's probably playing with his electrolytes and stuff. I don't necessarily think it's that. I think going along the line Skip was talking about was stretching and mobility. I think that's important. A lot of us have lower back pain because we do things like we all work, or most of us work our adductors really, really hard. And we neglect the abductors. So we're creating a strength imbalance there, which could be leading to this. You could have a tight psoas. You could have a glute minimus, which is really weak, which is causing that. So I would look at, and I'd get with a PT, because a PT knows how to put you on the table and, like, how they put their hand there and, like, you drive your knee out or you drive your knee in, and they can determine, like, okay, is one side stronger than the other, creating an imbalance from left to right or front to back. I think you need to work with someone that knows how to do that kind of stuff and be like, oh, boom, your glute minimus is weak on your right side. You need to do these exercises as a warm up, and then you need to do these supplementary exercises a couple times a week to strengthen that body part. And usually, to strengthen a body part that's weak like that, it doesn't mean like you're putting an exercise in your plan and treating it the same way you would like squats or leg press. It means like you just have to activate that muscle. You need to build a neural pathway to activate that muscle so that when you're training, it's activating that muscle and it's not a weakness that's just turned off. And then the other thing you brought up was hip mobility. Gone are the days where you just walk into the gym and you go to the squat rack and start squatting. Like if you go to the gym at MI40, all of us are training legs, 10, 15 minutes of 90-90 stretch, different lunges, different back stretches. There's a whole slew of things that we do based off of our individual issues and injuries. And the last thing I'll say is he going into the gym and just squatting like cold? Meaning,
it sounds like he's just going straight into it.
Because he didn't say I did some ham curls first or I did some leg extension. I would look at your exercises you're doing leading up to that, because I know if I just walked under a squat bar and just started squatting, 135 would probably break my back. Like, I need to get my body temperature up. I need to get my muscles pliable and moving. And usually that involves 2 or 3 exercises before trying to do some type of spinal loading exercise to be at my best. Like, I will lift more weight by far after I've already done 2 or 3 exercises versus being able to go in there and just hit it cold.
Yep.
Yeah. I agree with all that. I mainly focused on diet, and even if he
Okay.
didn't want to get actually diet down, I would bet you that if he cleaned his diet up and he was just pushing like super clean foods at 25%, I guarantee you he'd start getting leaner. He'd drop water and he'd feel better. You know?
And holding more water when you have a higher body fat level, guaranteed
Mm-hmm.
that lower back is going to get tighter, because it's when we go on compounds or we start a cycle that a lot of times people will say, "Oh, my lower back is so pumped I could bear," because you're holding more water than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely, absolutely.
In reality, he should be doing all the things that we're talking about, and I think back pain, back pumps will be a thing of the past if he starts incorporating something from everything that we said.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if anybody ever questions Mark Hector's training technique, holy shit, can we just take a minute and look at this back development? Holy crap. Holy crap, that is a back.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's
That-
not
it's-
even fair.
It looks, we got to get Goob on this. It's got to be,
Yeah.
it's gotta be
Everybody check
gotta
the
be
door frame.
Photoshop.
Check
Yeah.
the door frame.
Yeah.
Make sure it's straight.
That's incredible, man. That is
Yeah.
like otherworldly.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see.
That's
what else
just
we had.
slabs of beef.
It
Just
really
slabs of
is,
beef.
man. It's ridiculous. All right. Okay. So there was another one from Patreon. Craig. He says, okay, let me blow this one up here for myself so I can read it. All right. He says, I guess this could be for any of the podcasts. Well, it ended up on Blood, Sweat, and Gear. He says, I'm 41 years old. He says he's a 41-year-old guy that has been on and off again in the gym most of my life, as well as playing hockey in a rec league. I have dabbled with a bit of gear in the past. I am starting to train again. I am out of shape, but looking to get back into a mild cycle to get some strength, some gains of my legs, get my legs back under me for hockey. Would I be crazy to go beyond test only, or would I see benefit in an oral only, or test and a little extra? Thanks, guys. Love your content, and I'm glad to be contributing to help you to continue creating content. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Craig. Thanks for being with us.
What say you, Andrew?
I would absolutely do TRT test and then throw in something else. Like, I'm a big fan for, guys in their 40s, like testing Masteron. I think, I don't know his previous experience, but let's say, he's running 300 tests and 200 Masteron, something like that. I wouldn't be opposed if he was like, I'm going to do 300 tests and I'm going to add, 25 to 50 mgs of Anavar a day. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. I think the biggest thing that's going to help him is getting on a routine for his diet, his cardio, his training, but then adding in, like I said, 300-400 milligrams of test, 200-300 milligrams of Masteron. I don't think he'll be unhappy.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I was going to go the test plus,
Yeah.
without the dosage being very high. I'm not a big fan of oral only. I feel like he would benefit while I was on. When he got off, there'd be no benefit there. And just harsher on the system, harsher on your liver. So, yeah, that's probably the route I'd go. I don't have much to add to that, which is odd when you think about it.
I do the same thing. I wonder at 41 what his natural levels are. Maybe even get tested, see where you're at first, and maybe he's even in a position where it's like, hey, some TRT would benefit him.
Mm-hmm. Or he could find out that, like a couple of my friends who were in their early 50s still have an 800 test score.
Yeah, there's those crazy guys out there.
And you're like, you know what? Don't even shut that down unless you're going to go to 400 or 500 meg, because if you're going to do TRT, it's not even going to be worth it. You're probably not going to notice much difference.
Good point.
Well, I don't know, though, because there's a lot of guys that take 225 milligrams of test a week, and they go in to get their doctor prescribed labs, and they're in like the 1100, 1250, somewhere in that range too. So
yeah, I haven't seen a big change with people. Or people going, yeah, I noticed a big difference going from 800 to 11 or 1200. But
well, I guess what I'm saying is, though, if he's already, let's just say hypothetically, he's already at 800 nanograms per DL, and he's feeling a certain type of way, then testosterone alone isn't the only reason why he is or isn't making progress, because his testosterone is through the roof for a guy his age. And if he's not feeling like he's getting a lot out of training, doesn't have good sex drive, doesn't have, so I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, definitely like hit a nice little blast. And,
sure.
And,
it's misleading too, because that's only total testosterone. Your free testosterone could be in the
Could be in
crapper.
tanks.
So there's always that. Situations like that, I always tell people, you know what? Don't just go, because they don't know, because they're new to TRT and stuff like that. It's like, make sure that you get a free test read out of that too, instead of just total test. But and you have to wonder too, if the levels are good and the free testosterone is pretty good, may not have much to do. Not that they wouldn't feel more by bumping up and getting it higher. They may feel better. There could be other reasons, other variables that it could not be related to testosterone. Guys like that sometimes will hear people like us talk, and a lot of times it has to do with low testosterone levels. But when it doesn't, it could be other things too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You ever have a situation where somebody says, "Hey, I'm interested in using gear," and you say, "Okay, let's get your lab work done," and they just have like crazy awesome test levels. And have you ever tried to dissuade somebody? Because there's been maybe 2 times where I've been like, you know what, man, do you really want to get into this? Yeah. Like guys that are just recreational. They're not looking to like, I'm going to bodybuild for the rest of my life. There's been a couple times guys like in their 30s into their 40s where they're just like through the roof. And I've been like, do you really want to do it? I mean, and they still have. They haven't not done it. You know what I mean? But there's been a couple times that I've been like, you're just so good. I kind of
if a guy wants to use something, he's going to use something. Like there's no talking him out of it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
By the time they ask the questions, they've already made up their mind.
They've already made up their mind. They want you to back how much.
If they know who we are, they hired up one of us. They've been watching the podcast.
Because they've already gone to their doctor, and the doctor's been like, "Oh my God, you're off the charts for a man your age. Like, you're actually off the charts for a 23-year-old male." You know, so they've heard that, and that's where I'm going with like so they've heard the experts say you're capped out or you're at the upper limits of testosterone, but they still feel a certain way and they want more. So in my mind, they're going to do more of something. So why not steer them towards doing more of something correctly, I guess.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. If they're going to do it, for sure. And it's usually the positive side of that is, or let me paint another picture. You have a guy who comes to you and he's in his 20s and his testosterone is already kind of like middle of the road, not so great. Then it's kind of like, oh, if you go on cycle, there's going to be a chance you're not coming off. You know what I mean?
I mean, isn't that us?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, that's us. That's every bodybuilder. For the majority of male bodybuilders that I know today, even after they're done competing, they're always going to do at least one shot of test a week. They're all, you know what I mean? Yeah.
How about this one? Got another one from Patreon, Adam. So Adam has been training for a good few years now, and he's also Patreon. He's from Michigan here, and he lost a great deal of fat. And he says, okay, general training question: how many working sets a week are most people doing, assuming they are training to failure? So I gave you the background so you kind of understand where he's coming from.
How many sets per week?
It's a hard one.
Yeah, working sets to failure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I can give my experience. We typically will do 2 working sets to failure per exercise. So if on average that's 4 exercises per body part, so that's like 8 working sets per body part per day or whatever you want. So 40 working sets per week max, probably. Maybe less than that though.
But that's total. How about per body part per week?
Oh yeah, if you're saying
then
8,
8 to 10, but probably more like if we're talking true failure sets, like not leaving any reps in reserve or anything in the tank, probably it might even be 6, depending, because I'm not counting every set I do as like a set to failure. Like there's usually 1 or 2 per exercise, and there's usually 3 to 5. So we'll say an average of 4. So we'll say 8 on average.
Yeah,
that's about where I am too. If I notice that if I go up above 8 working sets on chest, I start to see after a few weeks, I'll start to see a negative return on my investment. Where with back, I might be able to go up, higher than that.
Yeah.
Legs, I laugh and say sometimes, I swear I should just leave sometimes after 4 working sets because I just end up driving them into the ground by the time I get to 10 sets. 8, let's see. maybe even just 8 to 10 if I'm counting strictly quad, movements that involve quads without,
1, 2,
hamstrings. So
3, 4, 5. Actually, I'll go on record. I'll say you could arguably say that, like, okay, so I'll give you a leg workout and I'll give you an example. Okay, leg extensions. Let's say we do 4 sets of 20, and each set's getting heavier. So that last set is absolute failure where you're rolling off the thing. Yeah. And then we do one more cluster set after that for 30 reps. Okay, so that's 2 sets to failure. I would count those as failure. And let's say we do 2 hack squat sets to failure. Okay, so that's 4. And then let's say we do 3 or 4 leg press sets, but one of them is absolute failure. So that's 5. And then we do walking lunges, which are like double pump lunges. They're to failure, but it's not like gun to your head, you can't get one more rep. You know what I'm saying? They're walking lunges. Like, you could figure out a way to do it another walk.
Exactly.
So I don't count those to failure. I call that volume work, but like it's very effective. Like it feels great. It's loading the muscles up, the quads up with blood, and then we stretch afterwards. So I would say that some quad days are like 5 working sets total.
Mm-hmm. For him, I think maybe a little bit more because he has less experience than us.
Agreed.
With like 3, and I'm guesstimating, but I want to say it was about 3 years ago. He came over and he hired me to go through 3 workouts. We did like everything with chest, everything with back, everything with legs, so that he could really get the technique down. And then he just took it and ran with it. But at 3 years in or so, I know he's not going to his definition of true failure. It's something we're always going to keep redefining. I bet his definition of failure today is way different than when I met him, but it's not on par with like what yours is or Skip's is.
Yeah. I guess I would say it's hard to say, like, do you feel like you're working hard? Because everyone's like, oh, yeah, I work hard,
Yeah.
But
if you asked me when I was 15, I would have told you I was killing it every set,
Well, but the thing is, but wouldn't you say that you almost went to failure more, but with horrible form? Like I would say I did like 20 sets to failure when I was 15 or 16 because every set was just ride it until you're barely moving the bar. Mm-hmm. But you just have that energy to like do it again 2 minutes later. 4 more times.
But you don't have the contractile force that we can generate now.
Right. So that's what I'm getting at. You're not honing in on the actual muscle you're trying. So basically I did like 4 or 5 full body workouts a week back in the day. If you think about it, right? And still somehow grew. I would just say, like, maybe he wants to send some videos of what he's calling failure and we can watch it on the show.
He could do that down
and give a little bit more insight. And I always tell people this, like when they're sending videos in, don't like do anything different from what you normally do. Just put a camera on like 5 minutes before you even do your set. Like just put it on so you forget it's there. So you're not like, you're not training for the camera. You're not changing your form, your cadence. Like I just want to see how you do your set.
We want to see the recipe that's created what you're doing today.
Bingo, exactly.
Yeah, I tell him the same thing. It's hard not to. You know what I mean, Andrew? If I was like, Andrew, shoot a set of your back. Don't go any harder than you normally do. We're going to put it on the podcast for everybody to see. You're like, okay, I'll do it exactly the way I normally do. But then in the heat of things, I know if you're anything like me, you'd still like,
I mean, he has to know that everybody's going to see it too.
Yeah.
He doesn't want the audience to be like, oh, he don't train hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got plenty of videos of me and Nate on YouTube and videos of me and John Meadows training. I'm able to just be like, nah, I'm doing my set. Like, I don't feel like I train for the camera.
You know what I mean?
That's why, I do know what you mean. I think the average person would have a hard time separating. Yeah.
All right. Let's see what else we have here. Do you want to cover that one, Skip? There was something about fish oil. Is that something?
Yeah, I like the omega-3 or omega-6 question that George had.
I also got the sex drive one.
Oh yeah. All right. We'll wrap on those two then. It says some guys restricting their fats to like 50, 60 grams and
it's
relying
30 to 50.
Oh, thank you. Oh, my brain's not working with my eyes today, apparently. Relying mostly on omega-3s. I wonder if they could be deficient and see worse gains due to lack of omega-6s.
Like too much omega-3s could be bad, is what he's saying.
Yeah, it would be, but here's where this one intrigued me. How are you getting too much omega-3s to where your ratio would be off for 6s? 6s they're in damn near everything that a bodybuilder would eat. So I don't understand how, like, who is, I mean, unless you're just eating zero fat with no nuts and no anything like that, and you're just literally throwing down
Fish
like
oil.
whey
omega 3s.
protein and fish oil,
I mean,
right?
I don't know how you can get to that. I see omega 6s as just incredibly abundant, and we get plenty of them.
Yeah.
I can't. I would be
Well,
surprised if someone focused on omega 3s and got too much.
We'll put it this way.
Really
There's a
not the
reason why we supplement with omega 3s, and that's to
Right.
create a better ratio to the 6s, because any diet in the world, not just the American diet, is already heavily favored in omega 6s.
Right.
So, I mean, it's rare that people are supplementing with extra omega 6s unless it's particular, fatty acids, but because their diet's given them enough of that. So I guess I'd need to see an example of the diet and be like, well, there's
Yeah,
probably flaws in
exactly.
that diet that go beyond the omega 6 omega 3 ratio. Right? I mean,
Yeah, and he'd almost have to be an outlier for and that's why I wanted to touch on it, because I thought out of 100 people, if he's the one person that is getting too much omega 3s, very few people listening could benefit from taking more omega 6 is kind of my stance on it. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I can't see that unless it's just a horrible diet that you have all this saturated fat and you're not getting any healthy fats at all. And I don't know. Polyunsaturated fats outside of omega 3, they're not. This is the rabbit hole. You got to be
if
careful.
if they're eating a lot of vegetable oils, that might be a problem, right?
Sure.
But I'm with you, Skip, though, because I'm thinking about it more and more. Like, I guess I don't get the question because
Yeah.
how would you end up in that situation? I guess.
Yeah. There's a better. So
Right.
George, if you could kind of expound and maybe send the diet to one of us or something that shows that the omega 3s are so absurdly high, we'll take a look at it. I don't know how that would be.
Like, you'd have to avoid so many bodybuilding foods, like
exactly,
staples, to get there.
Yeah.
So let's say you're following a true ketogenic diet, but your fat source is literally like a gallon of fish oil a day.
Yeah.
Maybe you get there, I guess.
Yeah.
That diet, you would be on the toilet a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because you'd be eating like hundreds of grams of fish oil. So
yeah,
that's a stumper.
It's a bit perplexing.
Yeah.
How about this one? Question for the show. How do I keep my sex drive up while coming off of a 2-year cycle, just falling back to TRT, and maybe whatever else it takes to keep my to keep me sexually alive? Thank you, guys.
I'll tell you why I'm laughing. My sex drive is way better on TRT than it is on cycle. Like, I don't know too many people who have a better sex drive on cycle unless it's the first quarter of their cycle when their blood levels are going up. Once you get up there and you're using a good amount of gear, I don't know if the sex drive is off the hook, is it?
Let me ask you this, though, Skip. Do you find that you have issues not when you're on PEDs or like high drugs, and not when you're on TRT, but more so in that time frame where things are going down, your blood levels are going down? I find that's when a lot of people have, like, once they're back to a baseline of lower testosterone levels, I find their body regulates. And once they're at a high level, depending on the compounds they're using, they're pretty good. But it's like that time coming down, especially, that's an issue for a lot of people.
I'll tell you this. Once I come off cycle, it could only be a couple weeks. As soon as my blood levels start to decline, I automatically notice a higher sex drive. It's not as good as if I'm just on TRT. I mean, if I wanted it to be great, I'd be on like the max, sex drive. It would definitely be TRT, maybe slightly above TRT, but those lower doses, I don't do. And I don't know a lot of people who do well on bigger cycles. It's not bad. It's just not crazy high sex drive.
I would argue also being multifactorial, like everything, but like typically I feel like when people are running much higher cycles, their brain is always focused on their bodybuilding more so than when they're cruising. So meaning like there's more emphasis placed on, well, sorry, I can't right now because I got to eat my meal in 20 minutes and I don't want to have a full stomach. Well, I'm being serious about this. Like,
no, absolutely.
More focus on what you're doing.
Or if they're in a contest prep, their brain and their body is so deprived of calories and fatigue that they're just not getting those signals, because it's a defense mechanism to say, no, save that energy. Like, go find more food. Don't waste it on trying to procreate or anything like that.
Right.
But the answer to his question, something you can try. I don't think you can go wrong by doing like 0.25 milligrams of Carb with like 25 milligrams of Proviron. Like, if you needed a crutch or like a fix, you're like, man, dude, my wife's getting pissed at me. Like, something's up. Try that, and I think you're going to get a nice experience. We'll leave it at that. It's a go-to that I use with a lot of people, and they're like, man, that worked. I'm gonna use that again, because sometimes it's an issue with prolactin. Sometimes it's an issue with your HBG. Sometimes it's an issue with your estrogen.
And that's where I was going. I was going to ask you guys if you thought, because I don't necessarily think, or I'm not necessarily convinced that it's the decrease in testosterone. I think it's the fluctuating, like you said, essentially female hormones. I think that that plays into sex drive. I think because if you just had none, if your test level was low, that's different. And a lot of people will still, how do I say this without it being TMI? A lot of people will still function and everything will work fine on low testosterone levels. But the desire of, chasing your spouse around isn't as, the appetite isn't as voracious. As, it's not on your brain like it is, when you're, so I don't know. I think I'd argue that it has more to do with estrogen than it does even testosterone, until your testosterone is just in the tank. And then it could be argued that your testosterone's in the tank, then your estrogen's in the tank too, or your estrogen's too high. Because remember, sex drive, not you guys know this, but the listeners may not know this. Everybody is tied into only low estrogen bothers or gets in the way of sex drive, but so does high estrogen. So you're best from a sex drive standpoint, you want your estrogen to be high, but not too high.
Like high normal, right, a little bit above.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess what he really should do is get labs, right? Because he said he was on a 2-year cycle. Now, was that a 2-year TRT cycle, or was that a 2-year like I'm blasting cycle?
I think he might be the same guy who had said he was on EQ for 2 years. We had a guy who said he was on EQ for 2 years. Well, he tried to go to Primo, and when he tried that, it wasn't working. Libido went down, and we suggested that he took a break.
Yeah, what, is there testosterone in there? I mean, you have to
that's
wonder
what I'm
too.
Getting at.
Okay,
so
what those ratios are.
Has he shut himself down for good? Is what I'm thinking. So that blood work. Got to get some labs done.
Yeah. Or the Primo was high and the test was low, and the EQ was high and the test was low, and he was running, low. The other thing too is there's some people who are kind of a holdover from prior to I call it the change, the Primo EQ phase, much like you have the caveman age and all these historical ice age and everything else. We're in the Primo EQ age now, where some people are using Primo and EQ and they're still using an AI, and they don't know, if they're not doing blood work, their estrogen's in the shitter.
The post-Arimidex age.
And they can't figure out why. Why their sex drive isn't there. So blood work, see what it looks like.
I would start with the labs and go from there, and then that's where I would do it, because without that information, we're literally throwing darts at the wall, and
much like he is.
Yeah.
All right. I have one more.
I didn't mean literally. If that's right.
It just sounded funny.
I've got one more important question. Skip, if you could have a superpower, but it had to be kind of useless, what would it be?
I'd probably want to see through walls.
That's not useless though. That's that could be very beneficial.
I can't imagine having a superpower that was useless. It has to have some benefit.
It's almost useless. Or
almost like drone vision. Like if you could just go somewhere and look at something. You know what I mean? Kind of.
I feel like almost useless is like I could recharge my phone with my hand.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not a superpower.
Well, it would be if my
I
phone
guess
was
it
dead.
would be. It's just a
If
lame
Andrew,
one.
if we were at a show and Andrew was like, "Man, I was going to take pictures. Rachel's about to get up there," and my phone died, and I was like, "Don't worry, brother, I got you." And I just reached over and went.
Yeah, I think
Then
we're
it's
just
not
on a
useless.
different- I know. We're
It's
on a
almost
different
useless.
plane here, 'cause I'm thinking
All right, then I got a better one for you.
What's that?
I got a way better. If I could have a superpower that was worthless, it would be to put on as much absolute muscle as I wanted to infinity.
Yeah, that's pretty worthless.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
in the
I'll
scheme
take
of
that.
things,
I'll take that one
because
too.
it's literally just a vanity skill, right? I mean,
yeah.
you know. And I would not help you move your couch down the freaking stairs, neighbor. Or everyone's always like, "Oh, you're a big guy. You want to help me move next week?" It's like, no, I don't want to help you move. That's why there's companies that employ people to do that, and they get paid for it. I don't want to do that.
And notice none of them are like massive bodybuilders. The people who work there, they might be big guys, but
no, I had a buddy who owned a couple moving companies, and he only employed crackheads and drug addicts because they always showed up for work because they needed that paycheck every Friday. You needed overtime, they're your guys. And they would always be there at 7 a.m. ready to work, do their thing. They were the hardest workers because, they needed they were addicted. They needed the money. They needed the thing. And this is coming from him, and he's a former addict himself. So
I don't know. I can't think of anything. I guess maybe like I could automatically reload my magazines at the range. Because man, that's not fun when you have to reload your mags,
And your thumbs are getting sore.
Right. Right.
Yeah. When you were reading that, you're saying 60 to 90, whatever the guy had said.
It's
in the
like
question,
30 to 60%.
And you're like, man, my eyes aren't doing what my brain wants to do. Or something. I'm like, good thing you're not at the range today then.
Yeah. No, I have, I don't know if I told you that. People on the show generally know I have a learning disability. It's unspecified, but it has to. No. But it does make people feel bad when they comment negative stuff sometimes, because then I tell them and they're like, "Well, you piece of shit, you can't even read." No, it's
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
but I was saying in relation to your comment of my eyes aren't
with my eyes, whatever it is, it's the deal is that when I read, I can read and process something, but if you ask me to say read out loud or write it down, it's difficult for me. So I actually struggled in school. The reality is they said, well, because you had a high IQ, you skirted away. Like I never got noticed until I went to college, and then I did testing, and they're like, yeah, you were smart enough that they never figured it out. So yeah, but
I wonder what it feels like to be told that you have a high IQ. Is that
they didn't tell me that? They didn't tell me a number. They just said that you have enough intelligence. Yeah, but you're smart enough to not get. I'm gonna say it because I am a little bit. You're smart enough to
do it.
You're smart enough that they couldn't tell you were retarded.
Hey, there you go. Wah, wah, wah.
I said
you guys ever take the IQ tests online?
I think it's a sham, man. I think those.
I think it
things
is
are,
too, but it's still fun to do sometimes.
Yeah, because none of those things are ever going to tell you.
I don't think it's true. I was like, come on, get me into double digits.
All right.
Boy.
Well, that went downhill fast.
Incessant. That's the word for the day. Annoyingly repetitive, nonstop. So it could be incessant laughing. It could be incessant speaking. Like I was trolled by that guy last week. He used the word droning. No, he used the word, I drone on and on. And technically, and this is why I sometimes get irritated. First, his name was like turd sniff fart or something like that.
Was it really? Something like that? Yeah,
so I had to ask him, I don't know how you expect anybody to take you or your comments seriously with a 12-year-old name that's anonymous on, YouTube with turd sniff fart or something to that effect. Yeah. But the droning, you don't. That's just such a B-list vocab. It's not even correct. Verbose. Yeah, sometimes I get a little wordy, but droning. It's not just you can do better than that. So at least if you're gonna troll me, like I don't know, be good at it. I don't know. I still say this, Scott, and I think this is important. I think it would be a really good a really good segment every now and then. I think we should still consider bringing on someone who wants to argue, not just trolling because they don't like me or they don't like the way you read, or Andrew he gets that he's dry and he has no personality. I mean, everybody does. It's just terrible. Everybody does it. They have something that they get out of each of us, and I'm sure other people on other podcasts too. But anyway, bring someone on out of the comment section who is just so matter of fact and so. I think we should reach out to them to bring them on to basically give them that debate over 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah. And I think it would do one of two things. Number one, it might make people, because a lot of people wouldn't unless they were very convinced that the information they were given was solid. But it would also give them a platform to be like, you know what, I'm gonna state my case, and then you got to know this if you're gonna come on. That maybe we'll be like, okay, you explained it better on the show than you did in the comments. So
that's true.
I believe in part of what you're saying, and I believe in this, but I don't believe in this. Or we're just going to destroy you. We're going to destroy you because
there's probably not much in between.
No, it's going to be one or the other, because there's a lot of experience between the three of us, and we're not going to pull any punches. So I just think it would be. I think it would be fun.
We had one guy
who... It would be more interactive.
We had one guy who, said something on drugs and stuff once, and I told him, I was like, do you want to come on the show and talk about it? And he was like, yeah, I do. And I was like, okay, here's my email. Reach out to me. He says, oh, I'm going to. I'm definitely going to. And I said, okay, I'm waiting for your email. Never emailed.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for it.
Typically that would happen. But I think on occasion there may be some. Here's the thing. I don't know how you guys treat it, but sometimes I look at comments, not typically when they're coming up on live stream, because they're not bad, usually, rarely actually. But in the comment section, because everything is so anonymous still on YouTube, it's much to me like the message boards used to be, because there's really no background. I don't know who I'm dealing with and the knowledge or the experience on the other end. There could be some valuable information. There could be some good dialogue in there. Or it could just come out that
the problem
I don't agree that you know what you're talking about.
The problem is it's 2024 and everyone's trying to get someone in a gotcha moment. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Because I remember the board days, you sat there and shut the fuck up and you read, and there was a decorum there, and you knew the guys that knew what they were talking about. And when you actually had a good point, you expressed yourself in a way that they took it as you being respectful, but also gave you respect back because you had a good question or you had a good point. And that's kind of gone out of the discourse, especially with social media. The message boards were the first form of social media, really, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You were communicating. You didn't actually see the guy's face. You never really met him unless he was a big pro bodybuilder or something. But there was definitely a decorum there.
You had to learn code to learn how to upload a picture. That was the only difference.
Yeah. Unless you were on Get Big. Unless you're on Get Big. That was a Wild West. Yeah. That was you need to bring a bulletproof vest to that thing, because it was going to be rough if you didn't have a very thick skin. But most of the message boards, my experience, was just guys trying to help each other out, trying to learn from each other. But then juxtapose that to today, on like you're saying, Skip, on YouTube, everyone's trying to get that gotcha moment. You said that wrong, or you don't know what you're talking about. I saw a study, or I watched More Plates, More Dates, and he said, with his vast experience of never putting anyone on stage, that this is the only way you get lean. My thing is always and I tell you guys, it's probably getting annoying, but let me see the proof. Who are you putting on stage? Who's getting in shape? And until you have a body of work in front of you, I don't really take you that seriously. I don't care how many credentials or titles you have. Until you can do what we do regularly, putting people on stage in shape, getting pro cards, that kind of thing, I don't really pay much attention personally.
Mm-hmm. And there could be those people in the anonymous comments. That's why if you're listening and you think you're that person, great. That's cool. But it could go south if you're a little delusional and we don't agree with what you're saying. And some people would say, well, just because you don't agree with what I'm saying doesn't make it not true. It does on the podcast, because it does. It does to us. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'll speak for me, just for me. If I've been in this industry that as long as I have, and you're saying something that I think is absolutely silly, I'm going to say on our podcast that is absolutely silly. The listeners can make up their own mind, and if they think that there's some value to it, cool.
Yeah.
but not anybody who's going to be disrespectful. That's not going to happen, because if you have something that you think is valid, then cool. And I just think it would be fun. I think could be kind of a fun segment. But I agree with you, Scott. I think the vast majority of people, because I've reached out to a couple of people and said, I'll talk to Scott. We'll get you on. Let's talk about this. And there's never any follow up on that either. Yeah. So people are more quick to, throw jabs and want that little bit of attention than they do anything else.
I think too that a lot of the time, and I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt, I think that a lot of times people there are those people that just want to like troll and say stuff like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's a terrible cycle idea. Maybe that guy had bad experience with, say, DECA, and if he were to run DECA and whatever else, he would, have a bad time for him. He's basing that off of his experience, which is himself, you know what I mean, versus the big picture, versus, coach like yourself that, has seen this repeated countless times. Yeah. But we all kind of get put into the same category, you know what I mean? Because all of our voices are coming together. It's a forum of sorts. So yeah,
it's almost
that.
Like.
But I was gonna say too, though, that I think that some of our listeners, I think they genuinely are trying to get information, and they're getting a lot of information from a lot of places, and sometimes it might not all line up, or sometimes it's just so everything has to be so polar that. Say that first question we had today was like, guys are leaning toward high carb, low fat diets. So if somebody says like, oh, well, I use a high fat approach, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. You know what I mean? Because they were just taught like, well, high carb is the way to go, low fat. And they're like, oh, he must not know. He must not know. You know? Like Casey, Casey, the guy who asked that question, he's using pretty high fat, pretty low carbs, but there's a reason, because high carbs didn't work. We try that out the gate. I always try to keep carbs as high as I can. I guess we're coming full circle. You know what I mean, though? I try to keep carbs as high as I can with somebody. Not everybody can tolerate that.
Speaking of carbs, I've got a woman who's 138 pounds. Okay, her diet. Because I had sent this to Nate, like, holy crap, look how much she's eating. 167 grams of protein, 647 grams of carbs, and 140 grams of fat for about 50 calories per day. And she still is only gaining like 0.2 pounds a week. Now she's a farm, like she's a cowgirl, like real farm, rides a horse, like works outside all day.
Dang.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking like, I just added 2 of the biggest cookies you can find to your diet every night. Like that's her, because she's already eaten the chicken and rice. She's already eaten all the beef. She's eating honey. She's eating raisins. She's eating, almonds. She's drinking 2 Gatorades a day as part of her water. Like, we're doing all the tricks you can to fit calories in without crushing the appetite. And now it's like, okay, if you eat all your food for the day, 2 cookies, go find, some cookies you really want to eat that you can eat a lot of, and you're going to do 2 of them every night.
That's wild.
Levain. Anybody needs good cookies. Levain Bakery? No shit. Oh, yeah.
No, I don't know that.
New York institution. Matter of fact, I think I have an order of oatmeal raisin coming here in a couple days. My wife really likes them too. We celebrate her birthday on Sunday. So,
happy birthday to her.
Yeah, she was
anybody from Pittsburgh, the Oakmont Bakery. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that place.
Nope.
Oh my God, dude! It's like, not only does it just look incredible, like, because sometimes you look at you're like, oh, it looks so good, but then you eat it, you're like, it's more for show.
Yeah,
right.
It backs up as good as it looks, and it got everything. And it's like, I bring all my clients there when we're at North Americans after the show, and leave them like bags of stuff to bring home. I'm gonna give some to my mom. It's like, no, you're not. You're gonna eat those. I know you.
Yeah.
And it's not even expensive. So shout out to Oakmont Bakery in Pittsburgh, right outside downtown.
I think I went to a cookie place there a few years back, but it was like, I think, a chain type place. I don't know what, but it was like just you only something like that. You bought like one cookie, that's all you needed.
Yeah,
I give Crumble credit because they have different cookies every week.
They rotate them.
Okay, so that's cool, but they're just under.
They are good, but it's like they're good once a year, not like
They're underrated, I think. But.
Yeah.
Or overrated.
Overrated.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Definitely overrated. Thank you.
But I'll tell you this: they're better than that. What's the other one? Insomnia cookies. I think they're way better than.
That's
Insomnia.
where I think I might have gone to.
I don't know if I've had insomnia. One on the internet that is, and it depends on the type of cookie you like. If you like really decadent, like dessert heavy cookies, Taylor
That's what
chip.
this was.
Taylor chip cookie. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of those heavy, 4-pound cookies. I do have a client, Devin. He is from Oregon, and he has some pretty good taste in cookies too. But those heavy, it's kind of like fudge or heavy brownies.
Yeah.
They're good for like 2 or 3 bites, and then after that, it's just too much.
No, I could eat a pound of fudge.
Is that right? I
Oh yeah. In fact, I think I did when we went to Traverse City.
Really?
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Sugar-free Subway cookies.
Oh,
I got to tell you that the Subway has Panera. Panera has good cookies as well.
But Subway sugar, I used to load people on Subway sugar cookies.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because they don't mess your digestion up. Whatever flour they use, it's pretty solid for most people, and they just go down so smooth. Like they just barely cook them enough, and they're good.
That's a good point. Yeah,
Yep.
It is a decent cookie.
All right, guys, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and leave us questions for the next show. We're going to need questions for the next episode, and I think we have a guest coming up here in the future, so that'll be cool. Of course, reach out to Andrew, bodyberry.com. Reach out to Skip, teamskip.com. Reach out to me, mcnallydiets@gmail.com, and check out True Nutrition. Use our code THINK over there for some good savings on high-quality third-party tested supplements and supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. And thank you guys, everybody from Patreon. We did a bunch of Patreon questions today, so load us back up over at Patreon, guys. We'll get to some more questions on the next show. And for another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear, we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.